So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final session in our outreach series. My name is Christine Krieger, and I am the professional development consultant for the Colorado State Library, and I am your tech support for today's session. Today, we are going to ask that you keep your video off and remain muted until we get to questions. If we have time at the end, you may be able to unmute and turn your video on to ask a question. Do feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat, though. I will help monitor the chat and make sure that questions get addressed. And so without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce staff from the High Plains Library and your amazing presenters for today, Rick, Rosa, and Matt. So I will let you all carry it away.
Thank you, Chris. So hello and welcome to Outreach Advocacy. I'm Rosa Granado and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. My co-presenters are Matt and Rick, and they both use he, him, and his pronouns. Before we start, we'd like to take a moment of mindfulness. High Plains Library District acknowledges with respect that the land we are on today in Weld County is the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and the Ute nations and peoples. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other Native tribes. We recognize the Indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it, and we further acknowledge the forceful removal of the populations after the Medicine Lodge treaties and atrocities such as the Sand Creek Massacre. Our intentions are based on our desire to ground and to acknowledge and support a state of change. We bring our increased awareness and consciousness into this space now and into the spaces we inhabit. We believe this land acknowledgement is a process of deepening our relationship to personal power and land. We acknowledge we are strangers on stolen land. With this acknowledgement, we bring energy that infuses presence, clarity, and a deep longing to be in alignment. Again, thank you for joining us today. This is the last in a series of 8 trainings that focus on outreach librarianship. We'd like today's training to be as interactive as possible, so please enter any questions you may have into the chat and we will answer them as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. The objectives of this training today are, first, we want to go over what is advocacy. Why is advocacy important in libraries and outreach? Some types of advocacy that you may do at different audiences, and then some examples of how we do advocacy here at our own locations and HPLD.
So what is advocacy? This definition, developed by the American Association of School Library Advocacy Committee, defines advocacy as an ongoing process of building partnerships so that others will act for and with you, turning passive support into educational action for the library program. It begins with a vision and a plan for the library program that is then matched to the agenda and priorities of stakeholders. So a definition that suits outreach librarianship a bit better comes from the Public Library Association's definition, which defines advocacy as the process of acting on behalf of the public library to increase public funds and ensure that it has the resources needed to be up to date and is critical to the success of libraries. What we found here at High Plains Library is that there is a need for outreach advocacy, which sits with anyone who is invested in outreach. It goes beyond the critical success of libraries in general and focuses more intently on the critical success of outreach librarianship. So before I start the slide, Chris has a short poll for you all to take. If you wouldn't mind taking that, we can talk about it before moving on to the next slide, the results. Chris, go ahead and pop that up there.
All right. Hopefully everybody is seeing the poll on the screen.
So why is outreach librarianship so misunderstood? Well, for those people who don't work in libraries, most of the time they just have not had a lot of exposure to outreach librarianship. If they did, they never really put a name like outreach librarianship to the services that they were receiving. But for those folks who are part of libraries, there still is a big disconnect when it comes to outreach. Often library staff cannot really define outreach or tell you what it looks like. If the staff cannot do this, how are they doing outreach? And more importantly, how is it being funded? If those folks in senior leadership also do not understand what outreach librarianship is and how important it is, Then again, how can they allocate resources to outreach and prioritize outreach services in their libraries? So some reasons why this happens is that there is no real formal definition for outreach librarianship and no real set of best practices. But the biggest reasons this happens is a lack of education and professional development in outreach librarianship. So how many of us took an entire class dedicated to outreach that wasn't really a class in marketing while completing our MLIS? I have 2 masters in library sciences, and neither of my programs even addressed outreach at all. There's a profound lack of education for outreach in libraries and little more professional development. Additionally, while our national associations have some information dedicated to outreach, typically this information is often outdated, irrelevant, or just not really hitting the mark. A lot of times people think of outreach and they think of, again, marketing or even sometimes just mobile services, which is just one slice of the pie when it comes to outreach. This lack of outreach education allows a lack of awareness and or even a misunderstanding of what outreach librarianship is and how to do it. With this combination, the result is a lack of funding, staffing, and support for outreach that really is impactful on some of our neediest patrons, those who do face barriers to service or are traditionally underserved. In the end, it is our patrons who take the biggest hit. Chris, would we be able to look at the results from the poll now?
If I click on the right thing, yes. Okay, are you seeing it now?
Yeah, so we have what most people say no. One result with an I don't know. We do have 25% who said yes. If you are the yes person or people, can you please let us know in the chat area where you took that course? I'd be really interested to hear that.
And we also do recognize that not everybody on the session may have received an MLIS, so that is fine too. So the second question is hopefully kind of getting toward if you've taken any non-MLS courses as well.
So go ahead and I think forward. I think we're there, Rick. So just an aside, I wanted to say here that I do know of one library program that does have an entire class dedicated to outreach librarianship. This is in Queens College in New York. The course is taught by Kim McNeil Capers, who also is the Director of Community Engagement at the Queens Library. She's been teaching this course on outreach since spring 2020. And that's a picture of her there. She's very active in ABOS, which is the Association of Bookmobile and Outreach Services. And while professional development has been an issue in the past, the Association of Bookmobile and Outreach Services has spent a year dedicated to creating monthly professional development opportunities in outreach in 2021. And thankfully, the Colorado State Library has also recognized the need for professional development in this area as well. Additionally, the ABOS Advocacy Committee is working this year on creating an outreach manual and using current manuals from outreach departments across the nation as the foundation for the manual, which will be available to ABOS members when it is completed.
All right. Well, you know, as Rose has been talking about, the misunderstandings and misconceptions of outreach, especially when we're talking to funders. You know, by and large in my career, I've worked in municipal and district libraries, and specifically in the municipal libraries, there's enough just misunderstandings about libraries in general. I remember one time we were talking to the city council, and one of the city council members got so hung up on the idea of the summer slide, not understanding, you know, the loss of education that occurs during the summer. But in this particular person's mind, it was all about, why are we putting an actual slide in the library? That's dangerous. And we couldn't get past that. So really oftentimes when we're talking to funders, not just explaining what the library does, but then taking it to the next step of outreach is even more difficult because it means so many different things in other industries. So really being an advocate for that is a huge piece of this, whether it's a municipal or even a district. We would hope that like district library boards would have a better understanding of these things, but that's not always the case. So really where we've seen this be really successful is to do a pilot, you know, test with what you have do more with less, and then use that when comes time for budget presentations, whether it's to a city council or also a library board. The issue we always run into with municipal libraries, though, is we can make the best presentation, we have the best data, but then when it's budget time, when you show up and present that versus first responders, all police and fire have to say is, hey, if you cut our budget, no one's coming when you call 911. And it's unfortunately it's a hard reality, hard truth. So rather than just having staff present it to these groups, it's really important to get community involvement, community buy-in. Those public comments are taken a lot more seriously and have a lot more weight, because with those elected officials, public comments are their direct representation, and those representatives, so they need to be responsive to them. They can blow off staff sometimes, but being responsive to your constituents is a whole nother area. So I think a big piece of that is creating those connections, knowing who in the community you can go to. We have a ton of really great community partnerships and even community members throughout our district, and utilizing the staff who have that skill set to create those connections. I'm a big fan of taking meetings whenever I can, even if it doesn't necessarily seem like a time to take those meetings, or it makes even sense, because you never know what's going to come out of it. And one of the really beneficial things for outreach is they're oftentimes more flexible than a lot of the staff that are at a physical location and tied to a desk. So they're really a great go-to piece for that. One of the other things, and one of the other talking points too in changing people's minds, is stealing a little bit from politics. There's really kind of 4 different levels or tiers to really focus on, and may not be the best term, but usually that top one's called an evangelist. They love whatever the library does. You can do no wrong, doesn't matter what programs you do. Then you have a supporter, which is supportive, but they could get a little sideways of you depending on what you're doing. And then there's, actually I take it back, there's 5. There's also a neutral level. They don't really care one way or the other. And then you get to detractors and your haters. Really, to make these changes and to get the funding to work, all you really have to do is you don't have to take a hater and make him an evangelist. But if you can move them up to just a detractor so they don't fight against you so much, or even get your detractors to be neutral, or neutral to be supporters, that's the key. And that takes messaging, that takes really working with the community and defining that need in that case, and being willing to go out and present to groups, go talk to Kiwanis groups, go talk to Rotary clubs, go talk to service agencies, different departments of government, being out there and being a face and talking about the need. There's always going to be barriers, whether it's physical or access barriers, and trying to paint that picture to make everyone aware of what those needs are and the need for funding. Of course, creating those connections and showing how outreach expands reach. We can't expect everyone in this day and age, or even historically, to always come into the library. But unfortunately, some of those decision makers still see the world that way. The library is great. We need to come to the library. People will just come because we're awesome. It's not the case. We have to be able to be out there and show that need. And I think that's something that our team excels in. And I'm really would give all the credit to this group on that.
So we often think that advocacy is something we do outward to the community, our community partners, or maybe to other libraries, or upward to our admin, our board, or our organizational leadership. But we tend to forget that advocacy works best when everyone is on the same page and all members of the organizations have the same strategic goals in mind. Not only should we be communicating key measures or specific goals internally, we want to communicate interesting or noteworthy projects or initiatives that departments are working on, successes or challenges of library service or programs, the rationale and intentionality behind targeting key populations. How to communicate and advocate is something that we really want to talk to our own internal staff about. And simply, even what does a library mean to you? Those can all be ways that you can develop some of those internal talking points and get everybody on the same page to make sure that we are being able to move forward as a group. At the end of the day, it's important to realize that internal stakeholders are more than those who just make decisions who are upward in our organization. Similarly, recognizing that upward advocacy, while just as important as outward advocacy, We will lose momentum if not everybody is invested and we don't advocate to our own staff. Communication is the key here. Share what is happening across all levels of the organization to whomever you can. Develop elevator speeches to deliver maybe 5-minute, 2-minute, or 30-second speeches whenever you have the time to different audiences, and consider what type of things you want to be messaging to those specific audiences. You may talk about something different to a board member than you'd want to talk to somebody who is brand new to your community trying to get a library card. So think about those individual talking points and try to develop some short, quick, brief elevator speeches that you can kind of fire off whenever you need to. With these tools and ideas in mind, you can strive to strengthen internal buy-in and strategic goals and foster an institutional culture of open communication. Here we have listed external people that you might be doing advocacy to: community members, users and non-users, community partners, and other libraries. And similarly for internal, we want to make sure we're doing staff, admin, board, and organizational leadership. But when we look here and you see these highlighted or bold listings, these are definitely, if we're talking about advocacy in terms of frequency, we want to focus on doing the most advocacy to these groups, because as Matt and Rosa have said, a lot of times getting these community members and individual buy-in is going to be the largest and most beneficial aspect to communicating our message.
Just like Rick was saying, communication is key. I think specifically internally, both to the administration, but then also to the staff. You know, when we look at budgets and we're looking at if we put, you know, if we take money and invest it more heavily in outreach, that can often be seen as taking something away from another department. So that communication piece is so vital to get that buy-in and to show those different groups that it's really a partnership. It's not you're losing something if we're investing in outreach. It's just you know, an expansion of the services. And I think that's really a key to this. You know, in addition, I think when we're looking at library boards and administration, there's still misconceptions out there, especially amongst boards. You know, a few of them, as has been mentioned before, that outreach is often viewed as just marketing. And we ran into that when I first started. Our board was just focused on, we want our outreach vehicles in every parade. Not that we necessarily want, you know, staff at booths at events. We just want the bookmobile to drive through. It took some time and some cajoling and some discussions and some data to really get the board to understand that that's not the best use of time. You know, if we're going to use one of those vehicles, we have to have 2 staff members on it. And if all they're doing is driving through an event or a parade, yeah, I guess that's marketing. That's not really outreach. Outreach is so much more than that. So really laying out the things that can be accomplished with outreach and the benefits that it has to the community. Another thing that comes up with that too is barriers. I've seen this throughout my career. Oftentimes, if you have a highway or a freeway that runs through your service area, that becomes a barrier. In one of the districts I worked in, it was actually easier to jump on the freeway and then just go up 2 exits rather than trying to fight the traffic across, you know, about 7 or 8 blocks. That becomes a barrier. And oftentimes that can even detract, and depending on how your organization is set up, that could take people out of your service area to a different area as well. So really being able to utilize outreach in those services to get to the communities in need that aren't really taking those or having that as an issue. And I think one of the key things to talk about, and this is controversial, I think, at times, but in my experience, a lot of staff have specific sets of skills. All of our staff have things that they're passionate about and they focus on. And I think in a lot of ways, when you look at outreach, it's important to understand that oftentimes our outreach staff have to be selling all the time. They have to be making those connections. They have to make that case. You know, when people are coming into the building, they're coming in usually to use a service. You know, it's, I need to print something, I need to pick up this material. Oftentimes our outreach staff are the ones that are engaging and drawing the public in, either to a service or to a conversation or to a program. And that takes a specific skill set And I'll be honest, probably not right for everybody. And that's not a knock against anyone. We all have a bunch of skills. I'll be honest, I wouldn't be the best outreach librarian. It's a specific, great skill set, and you know it when you see it. So I think that's another thing too, because I know on our board, oftentimes people will say, well, just send whoever we have out. Well, no, we have a specific skill set and a specific group that excels in this area. We need to focus on them being the group that's going out and doing that. You know, to talk a little bit more about specifically how we were able to get our board to buy in to expanding our outreach services, is one of the big keys we had is we did a strategic plan shortly after I came aboard. And throughout that process, we focused on really the needs in the community. We went out and talked to everyone throughout our whole district. And there was a need we need services outside of just our regular buildings, which made the case a little easier to talk about with our board. The other thing that came out of it too is we actually changed our mission and vision. So previously our mission had been connecting the community to education, entertainment, and lifelong learning, I believe, and I might have messed that up a little bit. And we kind of stripped it down to talk about that we are about helping build community. And that really helped us frame a lot of these discussions too, because when the board would say, well, why do you need to hire more outreach librarians? It was really easy to say, hey, we have these pockets that we're not getting to. This is a big part of helping build community. And that helped to bring in the story, you know, that helped to bring in the board a little closer to this. With that too, really success of outputs versus outcomes. You know, we can have tons of outputs that don't necessarily translate into outcomes. I think one of the best ones and one of the best things that's helped our board, and this goes into success stories as well, is the multilingual nursery rhyme booklets that we put together. And we have a little image of that here. Our outreach department actually went out with navigators and native speakers to work with our varying communities to actually produce these, to gather nursery rhymes from many of our immigrant and refugee populations' native languages and put that into a nursery rhyme book. In addition to that, utilizing virtual reality, actually put the book together in a VR platform that's available as a link in a DVD as well. Showing that to the board and saying, no, this is the work that our outreach team's doing has been so amazing to see the support that the board has based on these type of things. Also, it's really important to, just like I said before, get public comments specifically from those underserved populations. Oftentimes that might mean that you have to actually go out and either help someone write an email or write possibly a letter. A lot of times those underserved populations may not be able to make it the time when there's a board meeting, but it can still be read into record. It can still be submitted. Also with those groups too, having them have a formal request for service and actually making that request from the board. It's a lot harder to turn down a request coming from the community. And then the last piece I think that's really successful, but takes some work too, is really getting to know and working with your board and figuring out what their interests are. If you got to know our board member or our board chair, you may not necessarily see them as a huge supporter of outreach, but in talking to him, realizing that he loves, one of his favorite events is the naturalization ceremony that we partner with the Immigrant and Refugee Center, the Northern Colorado Immigrant and Refugee Center. And we put on, it's right around July 4th. Favorite event of the year. So tying anything we ask for and we request back to that specific thing helps to sell him on it. It's, well, we're doing this because that's an addition or an add-on to the services we're providing, and it ties back to the new naturalization ceremony. If you can present that, you're going to get his vote every time. And I think it takes some work, especially from a director or an administrative position, but it's so valuable. It kind of makes the whole process so much easier. So I think the key to it is try to structure your mission first and then tie everything back to that and tie it back to the interests of the board and really just showcase those successes, because there are successes at every level. It's just marketing those and putting those together.
It's really important to highlight how we need to constantly remind staff that we need to be advocating to our patrons and our users, and what it is that we do here in our community. One of the first steps in this process is first to identify your community, those who you're currently reaching, those who you might be reaching a little bit, and really those who you're not reaching at all. You have to think about those individuals that have a really hard time getting access to your services, or maybe don't even know what the library does for them. And as Matt says, we often have to sell the library. It's not just everybody knows exactly what libraries do and why they are here in the community, especially for immigrant and refugee communities. A lot of the places they come from, libraries are for the elite. It's only for people who can pay money to get into them. It's different here in our communities in the United States. So recognizing that and considering those non-user groups and how to reach out to them is important. And consider your organizational partnerships, both the ones that you currently are reaching out to, those who you may have some reached with, and those who you're not reaching to at all. You're going to be treating the community partners similarly to how you're going to be looking at your community members. Then you want to go through and try to understand your community better. And we had an earlier session in this series on community assessment and data collection. If you haven't seen that yet, go back through and check it out. But this will help you understand who it is in your community, and really maybe in a spatial way or in more of a data-driven evaluative kind of process, where your users are living and they're not living. How are people learning about the library, and what chains and networks can you really rely on to increase your reach into the community? We know we can really reach out to one specific targeted population in one of our library locations, but how specifically are we meeting the needs of the whole community that lives in that area? So consider those types of opportunities when you're looking at building up community advocacy. And then go out and advocate. Again, I talked about those elevator speeches. Consider building 5 2-minute, 30-second, iterations of the same speech that you can give out to different populations. And really you think about, especially when you're trying to go up to funders or your board, your internal staff, all of those different audiences, really think about what is it going to be that's going to make them get the most out of that messaging. And this could also look like stickers and branded materials. For example, we would visit our Colorado Early Education Network, SEEN Early Head Starts is what they used to be. And we would go and deliver story times, about 30, 40 story times a month to the different locations. But the parents of these kids never knew that the library was interacting with the children there. So we were trying to think, how could we better showcase that we are interacting with our community in a positive way? And we started with little stamps that we put on the kids' hands, and then we started going to stickers. But at the end of the day, children don't vote, the parents vote. And if they don't know we're out in the community doing these kinds of initiatives, they don't know we're doing anything. So think about the ways that you are reaching out and the ways that you can get that to the people who are helping make those decisions. And then finally, advocate. Be active. The worst pitfall you can get into is getting critical community feedback and not doing anything to remedy those issues. The power of the word of mouth is extremely powerful. And if somebody gives you some really interesting feedback about, this community feels like there is a barrier or that they're not treated fairly when they come into one of your library locations, and they give that feedback to you, couple months later, they go back and it's the same thing over and over again, that is going to travel much, much faster and further than if that was a better positive interaction. We want to make sure the community is aware of how we are positively interacting with our services. Otherwise, they'll only be aware of the negative interactions. Furthermore, we want to make sure that we're advocating for our patrons. And this is somewhere that internal advocacy becomes one of the most important pieces. As Matt and Rosa touched on a little earlier, the challenges of outreach include that it takes more time, often more money, and there are very specific skills that the staff need. Sometimes we don't see as many patrons as maybe a branch location would see in the same amount of time. But that doesn't mean that our patrons are any less worthy or deserving of our services. And oftentimes there are significant either institutional or structural barriers that prohibit those patrons from even visiting one of our physical locations. So consider advocating not only on behalf of our patrons internally for our libraries, but also advocating on behalf of our patrons to the community. If you are a location that sees a large influx of people experiencing homelessness, think of ways that you can help, destigmatize some of the negative stigma that lies around that population. There are certainly probably many instances where you have very polite, respectful, interesting people who come through, and other people aren't seeing that. So think about ways that you can not only advocate on behalf internally, but also externally, especially when many of our branches in our district serve middle-class white families, and that's great, that's awesome, but we also want to make sure that we're servicing the whole diversity of our internal community. And another way to do this is to be inclusive in our staffing. If at all possible, have somebody that looks like the population that you're trying to reach out to. That makes people feel a lot more comfortable, and it will quicken that trust building initiative, and develop a collection diversity within your own collection. We want to make sure that we're giving people the kind of collections that they are interested in. You want to be receptive to the needs of the community and not what you have inside of your own collection. So when I was an outreach librarian, I would visit a day shelter for homeless populations, and we would bring books to have people check out. They didn't want to check out books because they had enough things to carry around with them day to day. So we had to reevaluate, what can we be doing to make impact within this community? Specifically, is that going to be tech classes? Is it going to be offering Wi-Fi hotspots? What can we do to make sure that we are being respectful and responsive to the needs of this community? So we have a couple of videos here that we wanted to showcase. They're very quick. This is our community advocacy video. We have this on our Facebook page. It's something very quick, and it can do a really large amount of impact to showcase what we have offering, what we offer to our community in our mobile and outreach virtual and experience services department.
We are Move, mobile outreach, virtual, and experiences unimaginable. Welcome to the library. We'll meet you where you're at. We'll answer when you call. We're multilingual. Welcome to the library. 'Cause sometimes it's hard to get to the library, and sometimes it's scary to go into the library, but that's why we're here, to remove any fear. Bienvenidos a la biblioteca.
So literally less than 1 minute video, very quick, and it's very, very powerful. Next, we would like to showcase something that we did for more of a stakeholder level kind of advocacy. This will showcase some stats and some of the services that we did throughout 2020. This one is a little bit longer, but it also showcases some very, very important data to help get that funding and support. again, that video, a little bit longer, but it showcased many of the programs and events and services that we were able to attend. It showed staff awards that they've received throughout the year, the different online and conference presentations that we've presented at, some newsletter articles that we've submitted. Showcase a lot of different things that you can very succinctly showcase to a board or funders that would have a much higher impact than maybe an hour-long presentation could. Rosa, do you want to talk about this one a little bit more?
Yeah, and finally, this is the HPLD State Lobby video that we created for Lobby Day. This is done on a much larger scale, again, very short, created by our Community Relations Department. Not the exact outreach we're talking about at this moment, but still outreach in a different form. So again, just advocacy at all the different levels. If you want to go ahead and play it, Rick.
To talk about the importance of state funding to libraries and why you should continue to fund us in the future, we decided to make this as straightforward and direct as possible. Money turned over to libraries is not given to libraries, it's invested in the library and invested in the community. The difference between giving and investing is that investing means the effects are multiplied. High Plains Library District receives money, and we use it to purchase things. Each thing is checked out multiple times. Each thing touches multiple lives on each checkout. Then people connect to each other through information and stories. For example, a parent sharing a story with a child, or two people who talk about reading the same book. People are better able to connect over a language barrier thanks to our subscription to Mango Languages language learning software. Students are better able to connect to each other and help resources through our subscription to Tutor.com. The investment in libraries is an investment that multiplies community connections, and a better connected community is a better place to live. Thanks for investing in libraries, in community, and for making this a better place to live.
So that was some examples of how we do outreach here, advocacy within our own department and organization. Now we would love to turn it over to some questions if anybody has anything specific, or Christine, if we have anything in the chat.
I haven't seen anything come through the chat thus far. So if people have questions, feel free to, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask, or you can add it in the chat. See, now we might have to call on High Plains to do a how do you create video series.
It's our staff who does it. They work really hard on all that. And they're so passionate about outreach that they are more than happy to do them. We have a multitude of videos. Someone did say they had some connectivity issue, and we will be sending some links to Christine so she can post them. So if you had some trouble viewing the videos, just check back on the CSL Sessions website and you'll find them there.
Yeah, I should have the archive and the slides and everything posted by tomorrow, and I'll send out to the attendees like I did before. I will also quickly mention while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, when I send out the email tomorrow, I'll send it out to everybody who registered for the series. There will be a super brief survey, probably with questions that you've seen before, data that we need to collect for LSTA. But I'm also going to be inviting people to share any lingering questions that you might have from any of the series. And we're thinking of putting together some Q&A answer sessions where people can come and address questions. But I know sometimes you think of questions when it's not time to ask questions. So I'll direct people to send questions to me. They can be as detailed or not as you like. And we might do the Q&A around a couple themes depending on what questions we get from people. But High Plains staff has said that they'd be more than willing to have a session or two where it's just question and answer. And maybe a little show and tell if you guys have things that you'd like to share as well.
And we still are open for questions. I just wanted to shoot over to our contact slide to give you a little bit more information if you want to reach out to us. Additionally, we included Matt because he is an awesome advocate, but also he is an executive director of our system, and that might be something that you in your organizations have a little bit harder time interacting or advocating on behalf of your department for. So if you do have any questions about either how we are reaching out with Matt, or if he can help you with anything about what that process looked like in growth and development, we are all here to answer your questions in the future, but just wanted to showcase that as well.
And there's a comment from Nina that says, this entire series has been extraordinary. You all deserve awards. So many aspects discussed and such great information. I will be referring what you've shared as we develop our own outreach services. It's in the works for the future. And I will say, yeah, share the links when I get them posted to anybody and everybody. Doesn't even have to be in Colorado. We like to make this information widely available so that people can come in. And I think throughout all of the 8 sessions, there's something for everyone. Maybe your library doesn't have a bookmobile, but the advocacy piece is what you're looking for. Or maybe you do own a bookmobile and you're trying to figure out how to keep them maintained. I think there's kind of something for everyone. So share them far and wide.
Well, and I think, Christine, that you touched on something really, really important. I mean, right now we're at this certain place in our evolution. We have a lot of administrative support. We have a lot of support from the board for outreach. They've done a lot for us in the past years in allocating resources and services. But in 2016, our department had only 2 outreach librarians. We had 2 vehicles. You know, we weren't a large department. So we also have those other experiences that many people might be in right now, you know, working with an administration that doesn't recognize what outreach does or doesn't fully understand what outreach librarianship is, working in library systems that don't have large budgets. So how do you still serve your community? You know, I've been part of launchings where we've opened branches and served our community with basically, you know, very little funding. Matt has a host of experiences, as does Rick. And so if you have a question, and it might not seem like it's relevant for us, it really truly probably is, and something that we may be able to help you with. So please just, you know, if you don't ask your question today, give it to Christine when she sends out that survey. That way we know what people are thinking about and what issues they're struggling with, so we can offer whatever help we can.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I know this is the first of these sessions I've been a part of, but I've worked in, you know, a small one library systems up to where I am today. So I have a variety of different experiences as well with that. Got a lot of ideas. I'm not saying they're all good, but I think the one thing I just wrap up to everyone out here who's doing this work: don't be afraid to toot your own horn. You know, one of the reasons that made it help me out a lot in, you know, getting the support from our board is we have amazing staff that aren't afraid to talk about the amazing things they're doing. So I'm sure everyone on this in this meeting has those same stories. And I know at times librarians, myself included, may not want to always come off as is talking about the amazing things you're doing, because, you know, you don't want to brag, or you don't want to you know, be seen as trying to pull the spotlight away from anyone else. But that's really the way I think everyone's going to be able to get that support. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Be that person we talked about earlier, who's selling what you're doing as much as you can. Because if you don't sell it, very few people probably do it for you. So don't be afraid to do that, because I'm sure you're doing amazing work. Make people know you are.
Yeah, and Matt did touch on something important. You know, a lot of times as librarians, we don't even talk about that advocacy piece, but in outreach here at High Plains, we do. We talk about advocating, and we talk about advocating on all these different levels. We make it a point. You know, everything that we've talked about in these slides, every one of our outreach librarians and our outreach staff is familiar with, because it's things that we talk about on a regular basis. How do you create your elevator pitch? What do you talk about? How do you you know, advocate with patrons? How do you advocate with internal staff? And, you know, all of those things. So it's something that you need to approach very systematically, right? You need to think about how you're going to do it, and you need to mindfully create a plan for it, and then you need to go out and do it and make sure that everybody in your department's on the same page, and that you know, some people are more comfortable with it than others, and for those that aren't comfortable with it, then you work with them and you practice with them and you model it. You know, you take them out on the street with you and you walk into businesses and show them how you're talking to people and how you're, you know, advertising your services. And so it's something that you're constantly learning and teaching and evolving as a department and as a group.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any questions coming through. Once again, I'll send out the link to the archive by tomorrow with a little link to the survey. I popped my email in chat, but I'll include it. Well, you'll have it because I'll send it out via email. But so people can email me questions that you'd like to see addressed, any lingering questions that you think of, or questions that maybe people who weren't able to attend have. And we'll see about getting the Q&A sessions put together. So I think without further ado, we can end for today. And I want to thank everybody for attending. And I especially want to thank our presenters from the High Plains Public Library, Rick, Rosa, and Matt.
Thank you. It's always
you.
a pleasure.
Thanks all.
Thank you.